when we were talking last time about like, and this could jump off the podcast. I just wanted to show this not too long after our conversation about white people, black people in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Did you see these two white comedians?
Atlanta's the only city where you realize how many black people are there. Not that there's more black people there. They're wearing everything and
As a black person, whenever a white person do something, no matter how cool y'all was, you got to be like, oh, they just went back to, they were just white. You know what I'm saying?
Welcome to The Culture Edit. Unique perspectives into the personal and professional lives of individuals at the helm of successful business, athletics, art, and design.
Welcome to The Culture Edit.
Welcome to The Culture Edit. Nikki and Chad Strickland here because we realized that we don't say our own names enough. And for those new listeners, you might not know us and you might not know who we are, but
Especially this episode.
But we are the co-founders of Niche Culture, a strategic consultancy and creative agency helping very large companies define and articulate their culture to their employees and beyond. Yeah, and this week was really fun because, first of all, we're exhausted. Completely exhausted. I can put that out there, but I'm trying
It's Sunday, by the way.
It's Sunday. We're a little bit sleepy, but exhausted from the week, but also energized from the week.
Yeah.
We had a really fun, exciting beginning of the week. So as mentioned in last week's episode, we were flying out to New York with with Ashley, who's on our team. She was meeting us there, and we were having a fun team bonding experience because we're a remote workforce. Everyone that works for our company is completely remote. So anytime we can get together, I get really excited about it, and I think it's super fun.
Yep.
So all met up in New York, Manhattan, staying by the 9/11 Memorial, which I hadn't really spent a lot of time there looking at it, but
Downtown.
considering we were downtown this time for a conference, I did get to walk by a few times. But it was a Future of Work conference, which we've never attended before, but really glad that we did because it wasn't a massive conference. I think there was like a few hundred people there, maybe a couple hundred people there, but it was in a very intimate space in the Marriott downtown. And at first, our initial impression was like, oh my God, we're crammed in here like sardines. But then as the hours and the days went on, it forced you to have really comfortable conversations with people. And so we had a lot of great connections. I spoke on a panel about, at first, when it's funny, when we kind of signed up to do this panel, it was more of like a DEI focus. And candidly, I was kind of like, I don't know if I'm qualified for this because we're not a DEI consultancy. For those who don't know what DEI stands for, it's diversity, equity, inclusion. And there's a lot of terminology thrown around on how to define that now. And the panel was actually really, really interesting because the hot take on the panel was we do not call it DEI anymore. Like that's the no word because it's a very blanketed term for a very nuanced sentiment, essentially. Nuanced programs, like people are doing it all differently, like based on your employee base.
Or they're not doing anything.
They're not doing anything.
They're just calling it a DEI program.
Yeah, I mean, that's a topic for another day, but the hot take was don't call it DEI anymore.
Yeah. That wasn't your hot take, though.
No, it wasn't my hot take. But ultimately what it was about, it was about how do you make people feel like they're welcome at your company and like they belong there through your culture, your vision, your values, your commitments. My hot take wasn't controversial, I would say, but
I think it was a little controversial.
It definitely got people's eyes lit up in the room and they kind of had like an aha moment.
Well, you were on a panel with other folks that had talked a lot about how to use technology to do that. And then there's also were a lot of technology service providers sitting in the room.
Yeah.
And so...
Well, the whole conference was like... I mean, you know how these things go. If you've ever been to a conference, especially an HR conference, it's HR technology people.
HR software, yeah.
Sorry, software
Yeah.
Selling you stuff.
Yeah. Everyone was that except for us.
In JLL, they weren't selling anything.
Yeah.
But it was really interesting because going into it,
and I knew... plant people.
I knew, yeah, and the Gardenuity.
Gardenuity, yeah.
We can talk about them later too, because very interesting.
We'll do that in another episode.
My hot take was very contradictory. So the whole week was based around AI and how you can use AI and technology to attract the right people or communicate with your employees.
It's all everyone talked about.
And while that is extremely important, I'm not saying live in the Stone Age and like don't evolve. My hot take on the panel was that when it comes to making people feel welcome and making people feel like they belong at your company, we've got to get back to analog. Because buying a technology, okay, and this is what I said. If you're an HR leader and you were sitting at your desk and you have not been out in the field to ask people, ask leaders in the field, ask frontline employees in the field, ask middle managers, how do you want to feel welcomed? How do you want to feel like you belong?
Yeah.
And you sit there and you just hide behind a platform or a technology tool thinking that that's going to create culture or that's going to make people feel included. Honestly, like, you should probably not be in the job. And that's a really uncomfortable thing to say.
Well,
but
it's because it's hard to do that. That's why people it's hard to travel and go out into the field and talk to people and have conversations and schedule and, you know, do all those things that require a lot of time. And so it's a much easier solution for leaders to think that there's a technology that'll give them those insights and allow them to solve that really hard problem. And you basically said, that's fine, use all the technology you want, but you need to get out there and talk to people.
Yeah, I mean, technology
and the executives in the room, you got their attention. Other people that maybe are selling stuff didn't like that, but
for sure. Yeah. I mean, it's not they didn't like it. I said there's a time and a place for it.
Yeah.
There is a time and a place for technology. Obviously, we love we're glued to our phones. It's not like I'm not saying don't use tech platforms, but if you think that a technology platform or some sort of software is going to solve your culture issues or help you attract and retain a diverse talent pool, you're just wrong.
Yeah.
You're wrong. So anyways, hot take. It was a awesome panel though. Like the other panelists were amazing. Definitely some heavy hitters. And it was, I mean, we got, the woman from the conference said that our panel got like one of the highest ratings of the entire thing.
I believe it.
So it was fun. It's
not that it's competition or anything, but
not that
but
it's
you
competition,
were the best.
but like also I wanted to be the best. So, you know. But so that leads us into the topic today and our guest today.
We have a guest today.
Honestly, it's going to be a really interesting conversation, and I feel like it's probably a conversation that a lot of people have wanted to have at some point in their life.
Yeah.
Especially if you live
Definitely.
in Atlanta.
Well, it depends. I think it's going to be, some people feel uncomfortable with this conversation.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But I think it's refreshing. I mean, I've already edited it. And I think it's super relevant. And like, why aren't we having more conversations like this? It's kind of like we've all got to go back to analog. Like, let's get analog. Let's stop hiding behind our phones. Let's stop relying on the media to control the narrative, and let's just talk to each other.
Yeah, I mean, but people, I think this conversation makes people feel uncomfortable because what you're about to hear, the entire conversation is about race.
Yeah.
And it's about perspectives of how different people view each other, how people interact with each other. You know, we've known BAME, who's our guest, for a while now, and this is a continuation of a conversation we have basically with him every time we talk to him.
So I think the conversation today is a really interesting one. Every time we meet up with BAME, he lives in Atlanta, we live in Atlanta, and we run into him a lot at different events because we're all out and about doing our thing. Every time we run into him, like, we have really, really good, deep conversations about Atlanta, but also race relations in Atlanta, because Atlanta is the most diverse city when it comes to, I shouldn't say the most diverse city. Atlanta is the only city in the United States, the only major city in the United States where Black people are the majority and white people are the minority. That's so different. Like, he talks about on the podcast that, like, Atlanta is the opposite of the makeup of America.
Yep.
And so we talk about that a lot, and we talk about how important it is to have these candid, open conversations and stop assuming that we know what each other's thinking, for better or for worse. So I think it's a really interesting conversation, and we do touch on how that impacts the culture of companies in Atlanta and outside of Atlanta. So if you're a company trying to come to Atlanta, you need to listen to this conversation.
Yeah, we start off with that, and I think that's very, very relevant to a lot of the programs that, like we talked about last week in New York. If people have this perspective that you hear from BAME and, you know, what Atlanta's like and what it's like to be a worker in Atlanta, then it can be very useful.
So BAME is joining us in the studio. Very excited. First time is the first time he's visited us here in the studio because we're normally like out and about meeting each other.
No, he came to our last studio.
No, in this studio.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I'm saying he's the
Upstairs.
first time.
Yeah.
So this is the first time BAME has come to our new studio. And just to give a little background on him, he is the co-founder of probably one of the most influential Atlanta brands.
No pun intended.
It's called Atlanta Influences Everything. And they're not just a brand, but they're a creative consultancy as well. And they do a lot of really great work with lifestyle brands, everything from Sprite to Jack Daniels to Nissan to I would say more of like a civic community focus, like National Black Arts Festival. He also is the founder of CreativeCall.org, which is a community service effort in collaboration with Atlanta and Stockholm, which is random.
Yeah.
Stockholm, Sweden.
I don't know. We need to ask him about that.
Yeah.
Next time.
And so it's a collaboration between Stockholm creatives and recently was the community engagement coordinator at the Center for Civic Innovation for South Downtown, which for those of you not from Atlanta, South Downtown is the major development in downtown Atlanta that's trying to rejuvenate all of downtown Atlanta.
Yeah.
But he's a really amazing, like you'll hear him on this podcast. He's super strategic in his thinking, but it's such a real delivery. Like that's the only way I can explain it is like strategic, like hyper philosophical thinking with a real solid delivery. Because a lot of times we'll talk to people and it's kind of like pie in the sky, but like you can't actually deliver it in a way that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I took away from this conversation. I was like, man, this should actually be a class at a university. Like what we're talking about from like a philosophical perspective.
Very.
That should be taught at universities in the U.S.
Yeah, definitely. And if you ever been to the airport and walk through the airport and you see a T-shirt that says Atlanta Influences Everything.
That's him.
That's him. And his co-founders. It's a very popular brand for folks that are associated with Atlanta, especially athletes, even outside of Atlanta. They've done a lot of cool stuff, including 404 Day, when we touch on that as well. 404 is, by the way, the area code for the city of Atlanta.
Except I have 770 and I'm really salty about it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we weren't going to mention that.
I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
So
anyway. Give it a listen. Make sure you rate and subscribe the podcast afterwards, especially if you like it. Make sure you rate it.
Yeah, make sure you rate, subscribe, and share. Definitely share this episode because I think, again, even if you're not from Atlanta, this is so impactful. Like if you're a business owner or you're a business leader and you're saying, oh, how do we make people feel included? How do we attract and retain diverse talent? It's so important to understand why people do what they do and think what they think and say what they say and what matters. And so I think
that's a good point.
You know,
this is not just about Atlanta. This is
it's about culture. Culture Edit.
Yep, exactly.
Baby, we're back to the roots of the Culture Edit. So without ado, BAME Joiner. BAME, welcome to the Culture Edit.
I'm glad to finally do this.
It's the funniest thing when I say that to people. People get so like shy in that moment of like, oh, thanks. Like every single person, like no matter like you having a normal conversation, and as soon as you say welcome to the podcast, people get like, it's like you don't know how.
It's like, oh, it's real. It's happening.
It's like real.
And I guess
happening.
we all feel, when somebody welcome you into something, it's like a honor.
Yeah.
Even though you've been planned it, you just was talking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now all of a sudden it's an honor.
Yeah.
But it was an honor when I walked in. So yeah.
It's been a long time coming.
Yeah, for sure. And we've been traveling so much, so it's thanks for being flexible, or because I know your schedule is crazy. You're always meeting with a ton of people, and we feel like we're on a crazy.
Well, last time
travel.
we talked, it was almost 404 Day, which was a big deal for you. So we're like, we got to get past 404 Day before we can do this.
Were y'all here doing 404 Day?
I think we were traveling.
I feel like we were out of town because we
We
kept
were just
seeing
talking about that.
everything on obviously on social media, but I feel like we were out of town.
Yeah.
Okay. As long as y'all saw it. It's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, no,
Oh
we
yeah,
saw
we were
it.
like watching a lot.
Yeah.
But let's.
It looked like it was a huge success.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man. I hope y'all can come next year.
Yeah.
It's gonna happen until whenever there's not a 404.
It's crazy to think like that you've helped build a holiday for a city. Like that's effectively it's a celebration,
Yeah.
but it's like a holiday for the city, right? Is that how
Yeah.
you
Like,
Like, how
consider
do you
it?
describe it?
Yeah, that's the ultimate goal. Like I don't expect people to get off work or get out of school.
But people taking off work to go
Yeah, that's
because it was during the week.
post COVID. There's more flexibility
Yeah.
now. Schools, on the other hand, but what I am hoping, even it could be public sector, foundation, nonprofit, private sector. If nothing else, like people wear the most Atlanta stuff that day,
Yeah.
and you know, maybe do something special during lunch or something. You know, that's like the lowest level of engagement. Other than that, we've been able to stretch it beyond the day into a week
Yeah.
of activities that encompass the spirit of Atlanta, which we feel is, if there was ever a place where you would party with a purpose, the home of Dr. King and Magic City is a place that sets the bar of partying with a purpose, I
Yeah.
guess.
Not many people put Dr. King and Magic City in the same line.
Well, if I were to say actually Dr. King and the Blue Flame, it would actually make more sense,
Yeah.
because the owner and founder of the Blue Flame Strip Club, along with Herman J. Russell, used to bail Dr. King out of jail. So strip club, one of
Yeah.
the oldest strip clubs in the city, the founder of that strip club used to bail Dr. King out of jail. So
I think what, you know, in what we do, we work with big companies and a lot of like internal focus on employee engagement. I think big companies that are based in Atlanta, there's an opportunity to celebrate 404 Day.
For sure.
Like I definitely think, because they're always looking for a reason.
it was beautiful.
Yeah.
I paid attention to that.
Yeah.
Like it could be 11 Alive, Accenture. We got hit up by Accenture for an order of hats, and through this conversation found out that they were looking to do an internal celebration of 404 Day on April 12th. And when I asked about like, well, how or why, they were like, well, that's just what the memo said. It's like, okay.
They
Yeah,
missed
like, at
the
least they're
404
celebrating.
part. But
Yeah, but at least they're
doing something.
Accenture.
Yeah.
You know, that's proud. I could tell my mom, like, Accenture is like doing some Atlanta shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We need to think about that next year. I think
We have some
we know some
executive-
folks that we could
we have
talk
some
to.
executives that are listening right now that could definitely be inspired to celebrate 404 Day, because I do think, like, when we're working with businesses, a lot of it is around culture. And even though these businesses like Accenture are global or they might be national, and so they have employees everywhere, a huge bulk of a lot of our clients, their headquarters are here in Atlanta. And so we always, like, it's like everyone's trying to place like the same blanket of culture across their entire company. But sometimes our recommendation is, actually, if your headquarters here in Atlanta, you need to really focus on Atlanta-centric things to celebrate with your employees here. And it doesn't have to, like, your employees in Texas, they don't have to do it. Your employees in Florida, they don't have to do it. But really focus on bringing the culture of Atlanta into your company. Because I think that makes, it makes like all the difference when you're based here, to feel like you're really part of the community and not just a big logo on the side of a building.
Yeah.
Now, from a relationship standpoint, I'm assuming you two would know, like, how to sustain a relationship is communication between two parties. And so what I'm noticing, kind of some stuff at the chamber, but just other cultural moments. Yeah, to your point, the brand of Texas is, you know, now Houston, San Antonio, Dallas, Austin, they're all different from each other. And they have a harder time trying to, can Houston separate itself from Don't Mess with Texas? Or it's kind of tough. And then this Florida Sunshine brand, there are these things that are already layered on you, and you just, for better or worse, roll up under them. And in Atlanta, I think the growth, it's a variety of factors that make it, there's nothing concrete. It's just Phoenix, I guess, burnt down and reinvent yourself. And so for a company looking to lean in, the messaging from Atlanta in terms of how we like to be loved. You could tell us how you want to be loved, but it's my responsibility to communicate back how I like to be loved, and that's how we sustain a great relationship. I think that messaging is off, and I think it's tough for Atlanta to communicate to these companies fully who we are. We can communicate to them where there's real estate for them, and we can try to get you some talent. You know, we got these universities, we got this world's busiest airport, so we can communicate those things. But communicating to your word and what we're all kind of the space we operate in, culture. Atlanta doesn't communicate culture well, and I'll end that by saying, when Atlanta was courting the Amazon headquarters too, they obviously didn't choose us, and then later on they sent this report that made it around to a few people of why. They did eventually tell cities why they didn't, what they liked and what they didn't like. Some questions on our public transportation, you know, but one of the things was highlighted was culture, in a sense of what the employee was doing when they got out of work. And it just was not clear. Whoever was communicating with them on behalf of Atlanta was not communicating clearly enough what our culture was to paint a picture for Amazon.
Maybe they didn't understand. I mean, it's actually exactly what we talked about last time we were together. I think there's a lot of power in companies understanding the integration of Atlanta, like we talked about. We think, and I think it's just we don't have facts around it, but we feel like this is the most diverse city in America. It's also the most integrated, where I think white people and black people in Atlanta are so used to exchanging ideas and interacting with each other that I don't think you can find that in other cities. So if you want to have a truly diverse culture from an organizational standpoint, coming to Atlanta is the place to be, I think, because we're used to interacting and engaging and working with each other. And I think that's a struggle for a lot of other cities.
I also think, so it's, I did look up the numbers, or at least the 2021 census. It's 47% black, 38% white, and then like 15% other things. And so I think the reason Atlanta, or some people in Atlanta, have a hard time articulating the culture of, again, like, okay, what are people doing after work? What's the culture? Is because it's very confusing to someone that's not from Atlanta, or someone that hasn't lived in Atlanta for a decade, I would say, at least. It's a confusing place from a, like, how do you describe Atlanta culture? There's so many different people doing different things. And when you go to other cities, like if you're Amazon and you go to New York and you're in Queens, you know exactly what that Amazon, when people go to work at a fulfillment center in Queens and they leave, I think you can get a pretty good understanding of, like, everyone's doing similar things after work. But if you go to Manhattan, same thing. If you go out to LA, same thing. But if you go over to Oakland, different. But it's a very predictable culture, because groups of people are gathering in neighborhoods that look the same, do the same thing, sound the same. Here in Atlanta, it's totally different. And so how do you explain to someone who's only experienced separateness, and they define culture by a echo chamber, or people who all are exactly the same? How do you explain, like, well, that's the thing, is we don't have that here. I think that's hard for, if you don't live here, it's hard to understand that as a cultural piece.
I think, man.
It's like that TikTok video you just showed us.
Oh, yeah, yo. It was that.
People's brain, like, they, like, the wires are, like, crossed. They're like, wait, how do I comprehend the fact that everything looks different here to me from what I'm used to?
And the assimilation, when other races assimilate to America, there is an assumption by someone who already identifies as an American that, hey, you know, you must assimilate. Or you have these spaces like Miami and Houston. I'm at the gas pump in Houston, video starts playing, whole thing is in Spanish. And so it doesn't matter what type of American you are. At that pump right there, then and there in Houston, if you don't understand Spanish, it just in America, that pump, that commercial is not for you. But how is it not for you? If English is the primary language, then that video, regardless of I'm not even close to I'm not in El Paso. I'm in Houston. So how is the ad only in Spanish? But that's a safe space in some form. And so I think in Atlanta, where the unlike other races, the African American, whatever language, Swahili, Yoruba, like whatever language from the ancestors been stripped long ago. So the only language the African American knows is English. Who knows the Queen's English,
Not
but
us.
English and kind of I guess what we would say Ebonics or whatever. And so I think the assimilation, yeah, you have black people that try to talk white, and then it gets confused in the black community if enunciating your words correctly is the same as talking white. And now years later, I think we know there's a difference in behavior and posturing that comes with that. And so when you add the HBCU in terms of a college that is a safe space in terms of education, the other races, while they might have a safe space for their language, there is no Latino version of an HBCU or an Indian version of an HBCU. When they want to assimilate into America and go high, they don't have a Morehouse to protect them. So they got to go to Georgia Tech, and then now you got to start doing what the white folks doing. But you were straight over here in the corner. But the more you try to assimilate up that ladder, it's less of a safe space. But in Atlanta, the black safe space of assimilating up the ladder at a Coca-Cola or a Delta, you can still keep your black swagger, enunciate your words correctly, and kind of still walk with a little, a little cultural swagger. You didn't have to assimilate and still are just as American as your white counterpart in some form.
Yeah, and I think that right there kind of describes the culture of Atlanta is, at least from African-American white perspective, it's not stripping you of who you are. Mm-hmm. You don't feel like you have to assimilate to anything. You feel like, I can just act the way I've grown, like the way that I grew up in the neighborhood I grew up in, like, and how my parents spoke to me and what they taught me. I don't have to change that to be in Atlanta.
But yeah, but to your point, a lot of this is culture, and I think in Atlanta, like our Metro Atlanta Chamber or our entities that are recruiting companies to move here and wanting to help these companies kind of get acclimated to Atlanta culture, I think within the chamber or these entities themselves, that they have an inability to have this conversation amongst themselves.
I agree.
Which then doesn't translate to really anything to a company looking for cultural connectivity.
I agree.
Yeah.
100%.
And I think like it's interesting taught from the business perspective. So I guess next Tuesday, I was asked to speak at a conference in New York, and it's a panel, and they're like, can you speak about culture, diversity, inclusion, all that stuff? And there's like 5 of us and then a moderator. And I think I'm the only white woman on the panel. It's a very diverse panel. And most people all of the other participants besides me work at big companies, and most have titles of vice president of culture, vice president of DEI, vice president of people. And then there's me, which I'm like more of the consulting side. And at first I was kind of like, I always feel like I don't know if I'm really qualified to talk about diversity inclusion, Like I feel really weird when people say like, can you help us with this or can you consult? And typically we'll say like,
we get asked all the time.
Yeah, and we're like, I mean, we're 2 white people that own an agent. That's kind of weird for us to come in and like do, be talking anyway. But the moderator was like, well, but we can really talk about culture and like what you see in other companies, especially in Atlanta, like what they're doing. I'm curious to you, because we do get asked a lot, like we'll have an executive team say, hey, we really want to make sure this is like an inclusive place where people feel like they are welcome and they belong. How do we do that? And in my mind, what I want to say is, well, that starts at the top. It's how your leadership team looks and treats each other, and the ability to have, like you said just now, really candid conversations that might feel uncomfortable at first, but you push past it because it's necessary. That trickles down. So like if that's not happening at the highest level in big companies in Atlanta, I don't see how any program at the frontline level is going to change anything.
I mean, I think
I don't know.
To your point, Nikki, like that's
a
what
weird
you just
question.
said is why you get asked to be on the panel. Because I mean, that's having the ability to talk about the things that you're capable of talking about, just like we are right now, is exactly what needs to happen in an organization. But to Bame's point, there's a lot of people in leadership roles that are not comfortable talking about race.
I think the domino effect of that internally in companies in Atlanta allow for good-willed and good-intentioned initiatives. Like all these companies have, CSR initiatives, but they barely scratch the surface. They're making the company comfortable with what they feel like is helping community. But this same city is the same city that influences everything, is attracting these companies, is also number one in income inequality and has a 4% upward mobility rate. And it's been that way maybe almost a decade now, in some form. And so you got all these universities, and not just randoms, you got the high levels, the Georgia Techs and the Emory's and Spelmans and Morehouse. These are like nerd type people, and then home of Dr. King and Coca-Cola and Delta. So a talent and great minds is obviously not what we're lacking. I think that we also have, I found out a few years ago that the Metro Atlanta area has the most nonprofits per square mile than any other city in the country. I didn't even know this. I found this out like 2019, 2020. And so this like do-gooder, like, hey, let's start a nonprofit and save the world. Like, apparently we got a lot of people that at least know how to fill out the paperwork.
Yeah.
And so there's no shortage, but still number one in income inequality for like this can't. And so obviously there has to be a deeper root cause, and the CSR, a lot of these CSR efforts, they're not even trying to even go that deep. But I don't think that's them. Again, it takes two. They have not been asked or told, voluntold, however, by anybody on the Atlanta end, you want to help me, but this is how we would like to be helped. There's no, this is how we would like to be helped. And I think that how we would like to be helped, who speaks for the we, the first line of defense, is Chamber, City Hall. It could be even, Atlanta Convention and Visitors Bureau. These are the first line of defense if you're trying to figure out how things work here. They're not the only defense, but they're the first line of communication and defense. And because these people, cool people, moved here from somewhere else, got the job at the Chamber or they're good at the thing. They can do the job description per se at the Chamber. But do they have some cultural understanding of the city that they are representing? No. And is it like that around the country? Yeah, there's my homeboy Jesus Garcia, real A-Town, obviously Mexican, was working with ACVB, got poached to go to New York. So he's in New York doing the same thing. That was his first time in New York. He just got up there. But he already like, New York, they are, whatever schooling he getting, he's able to do he working in tourism. How you finna, bro, you just got to New York. So how are you working in tourism? They got a New York, they gonna New York him. Whatever is happening in the background, he is getting New Yorked.
Yeah.
So that he can do the thing. But in Atlanta, you don't have to know the Atlanta culture and landscape to talk about Atlanta tourism. And I did want to go back when it was something you said a while back about not knowing what to do in Atlanta. And I wanted to ask, like, so does like Atlanta Magazine and Jezebel Magazine, because there are guides and things of what to do in Atlanta. Yeah. So when Amazon is saying, or people are saying it's still unclear, is it because those same guides are part of a larger chain that you can find in any city with these same pictures? Are these guides that say this is what to do in Atlanta, are they not going deep enough for you on culture of why people still don't understand what to do? Because they're guides. I have my opinion on that, but
I think those guides have a very specific audience. And I mean, they're not relevant to Nikki and I, like to white people living in Emmett Park.
Then go to, it does like this. It's kind of the same. Like if you just Google, it's like the same recommendation.
Buckhead, it's a Buckhead. Everything's
depends what magazine, but
it depends on the magazine. But I see it as probably people coming up with lists that aren't culturally aware or don't live in the city. Like that's another thing. Like there's a big difference between living in this city, and even I'm talking about inside 285, but even further, like the city, like where we are close to downtown, you have a much different experience here living down here than you do in Buckhead. And so I think that's where I get, like, when I think about those lists, they're just not relevant to me. I don't know how you feel.
I haven't looked at a list in a long time since I've moved here. But when I did move, when I first moved here, because I was working for the Braves.
It's 12 years ago, by the way.
12 years ago. Yeah. I didn't know anyone. Like, I literally just came, visited once, did the interview, got the job, and I just wanted to be in a big city, and I thought Atlanta was cool. And so I moved here. I was just like living by myself, didn't know what to do. I was living right in Old Fourth Ward, and I looked at one of those lists, and it was basically like go to MLK's house, do a tour of the house, go look at the
which she did,
which I did. I did all the things, and go to the historic fire station, go down to World Coca-Cola,
go
to the aquarium, walk around Little 5 Point. I mean, I literally did everything that was on this list, and now looking back on it, like. I mean, it's still a great list of things to do, honestly. Like, it's not like I would say don't do any of those things. But I think the lists have been the same forever. Like, I don't see any difference in like, if I were to look up a list right now, it's probably, like, almost identical to the list I had 12 years ago. So I think for me, that's an interesting thing, is, like, Atlanta doesn't... It's changing so much, but, like, the way we communicate how it's changing isn't that clear. So that could be kind of one thing. What
do you think?
Yeah, what's your?
I agree with both. Like, the thing that has changed is I went to Atlanta Convention and Visitors Bureau annual meeting a few weeks ago, and they're selling the worldly culinary palette of Atlanta.
Yeah,
and I think. List-wise, you're going to get, from a restaurant food culinary standpoint, nothing is going to be the same. That seems to be, which is unique because it's like we don't have a Philly cheesesteak or etouffee or beignets.
Mm-hmm.
Lemon pepper wings?
Lemon pepper is becoming the thing that I'm cool with us doubling down on. Old Atlanta... It was around, the seasoning was around. It was an option, but it didn't really become this thing. It kind of got ushered in with Donald Glover's Atlanta and a few other cultural moments.
Have you seen the movie American Fiction?
Oh, yeah.
I just watched on the plane last night.
Oh, wow.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Nikki hasn't watched it, but it's almost speaking to what you're talking about.
Yeah, I love Jeffrey Wright, man.
Yeah, he was so good.
His Basquiat role and just, he's an amazing actor, but yes.
Yeah, but it's speaking a lot to what you're talking about there. I told you a little bit about it. It's, about an author who's black.
Oh, yeah.
But he doesn't consider himself a black author. He just considers himself a great author.
Yeah.
But then all these DEI initiatives, are forcing him not to be able to just be an author. So he writes a book where he thinks white people want to hear, but like in a satirical manner. Like he thinks like there's no way they'll like it because it's so bad, and they like love it.
Yeah.
But what's funny was there was a black guy sitting next to me. God, I wish I would have asked his name because we had a fun conversation after. He's an athlete. Son is quarterback or something at North Atlanta, your school. And he saw me like watching it and laughing. And then afterwards he's like, "Did you understand what that was about?" And I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "Do you live in Atlanta?" I'm like, yeah, I live here. I was like, yeah, it was like funny because they're trying to be funny, but I think a lot of people wouldn't get that.
Do you think
Right.
if you didn't live in Atlanta and watched it, would you be offended or think it was offensive? Or I haven't seen it at all, so I don't know.
Oh,
Like,
no,
you-
because
you
it-
only
it-
get the satire
he's winning
if you live-
awards. It's like,
That is a
know,
good.
because everyone's walking away with this feeling. I do feel like white people in Atlanta feel more. It's affirming. It's more affirming for them, where a white person somewhere else is like the first time maybe this light bulb is going on at all.
That is exactly right.
You know, and then I think for a black person watching it somewhere else, I think it might be more empowering to you if you're not from Atlanta, but to a black person in Atlanta, it's affirming what I already, been there, done that. I already knew that.
Yeah.
Oh,
The world I live in.
yeah, it's like my homeboy. He's walking. So I think there's different feelings from both races. Being from Atlanta or living here for a period of time versus not. Like I'm interested in that TikTok clip of the two white comedians. Like if they seen it, like how they feel.
I don't think they would get it.
No, I don't think they would get it. I there's a little longer of that clip, and I think if you, because they're known, and when I saw in the comments they were posting their tour dates. I think this clip might be one of their highest clips or shared, and there were. What was interesting is the amount of black people that were like immediately offended, and either there were other Atlanta people in the comments that I knew, or I didn't know, but were from Atlanta or something, and it's a small group compared to disparate African Americans, spread throughout. Even though a majority of African Americans live in the Southeast, these are just random African American people on Instagram, where I saw it or TikTok and talking, and they were like offended by the laughter. And the laughter was like, it's like the white inside joke. But Isaac Hayes, the third, who had posted that clip, and it's like on some, if you know, you know, and I found it to be organic comedy. Like the water, I don't think that water spit out was planned.
Yeah, it's the world they live in.
Yeah,
like it is.
And I think when he said, I think the other guy was like, he said what apparently I was thinking, didn't know I was thinking it, but how many other white people first time really being here and was like,
a lot.
And he said it. And
Yeah.
I think the guy spit out the water because he couldn't believe he said it. And then he tried to clean, like, more black people. It's like, and that when he said, and all I could do is laugh. I laughed with them. My first thing was that I joined them in the laughter. That was so crazy. And then I went to the comments. Then I got a visual of like how Lennox just became, whatever it's become.
The hangout spot.
Yeah. But which it always was, but then, it kind of went to another level. And then you felt like, white people felt like, okay, well, surely Phipps is, oh, no.
Yeah.
And so when he said, and they're wearing everything, I'm like, oh, hell yeah. 'Cause I have seen it and been shamed. I have seen and it's a mixture of America capitalism and trends and TikTok and hip hop. But
Yeah.
some of these brands that might be high level white top tier brands,
Yeah.
the community of folks didn't know about it. Few rappers get it. They already know how the culture works. And so now it's like, oh, the Vulgari store is at Phipps. I have, through various means, could be legal, could be illegal, I got $100K I can blow, or
Yeah.
50.
Go
maybe,
get something,
you know.
yeah.
Tax season was good. But I haven't really been on that side of town, but that's where the story is. So I might go in my slides, in my wife beater with the shirt open, or I might go with a bonnet and some slippers just on some shit.
Yeah.
I might not supposed to look like this, but I bet I got the money to buy this shit, and I bet you gonna sell it to me. And that's where the black person in Atlanta has a certain type of arrogance, and there's this unwritten rule with the white person in control of the products or the experience. Now, from a restaurant standpoint, they don't need your money that bad, so they might turn away the white Air Force Ones or certain things at the restaurant.
Well, and that's the thing is like, from our perspective, or from my perspective, like I'm not surprised by that, but I see those guys in that TikTok video making that joke. I understand because they don't live in that world and they don't see that. I mean, it's like what we talked about with you last time we were together, like friends that come visit us, like they have a completely different experience coming to visit us in Atlanta than we do going to visit them in LA or New York.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, because everything is together. Everyone's going to the same places from very different places, and that's just how Atlanta is. And so I think when someone visits Atlanta, I use here, when I say here, like the Beltline, just because that's where we're at right now. Like, and I feel like walking down the Beltline is like truly a melting pot of everything. But when someone that is used to being in New York and they're used to going to the High Line, which is like, there's not a lot of people always on there anyways, but when you look around, it's like $5 to $20 million homes overlooking the High Line, everything like that. And it's like kind of people looking around like it's a museum. Whereas you come to the Beltline and it's like everyone just having fun. Everyone just like, so when you come here and see the diversity and everyone's here together, I think it's kind of like a shock for people.
Yeah, and that's why like when I see that video, to me it's more like a shoulder shrug. I'm like, ugh, it's like you laughed. I didn't laugh because I'm just like, this is stupid.
The character trope of a New Yorker, there are certain movies where they have to give more, they have to do more things to paint the highline white person or the upper. It's there in the character trope memory of what I think about a New Yorker in a movie. But like a movie like Ninja Turtles or something where they try to like double down on like the New York story, the race does not come into play. It's this brash character of a New Yorker that does. Similar to Bostonian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In a sense.
It's more of how they act.
Yeah. More
Yeah.
how they
Yeah.
act.
Yeah.
Which makes me think you could confuse that for understanding and acceptance of someone's background from TV perspective. But I might not even take the day to have an understanding and acceptance. It's this behavior that those cities kind of force upon you to a certain extent that makes us all in tandem, all together.
So in Atlanta, is there anything similar to that?
There's really no set behavior per se. There are some adjustments you might have to make, but not like a set behavior. And I feel like from a character trope standpoint, even in Hollywood, like Baby Driver was done here, and the city still identifies Baby Driver kind of as an ode to the city. But from a character standpoint, and it was maybe because it was Jamie Foxx and like certain people that what's his name? Kevin
Spacey.
Yes.
Yeah.
They already had defined Hollywood roles, so to see them in Atlanta is like, but that was supposed to be like a love letter to Atlanta. That Baby Driver didn't try to say they wanted to identify that they were in Atlanta the extras, these people. Now, it was much different than T.I.'s ATL movie. That was a specific kind of black Atlanta story that was called ATL, which is, I think, is interesting from a brand name, is that the blackness of the letters ATL, that T.I. can make a movie about black Atlanta, just call it ATL, where you couldn't call a black story about New York. You couldn't just call it NYC.
Yeah.
It's
true.
But in Atlanta, you can kind of take ownership of those three letters in a way. And Baby Driver told a more gen pop, what it showed. But what was interesting is from a character trope standpoint, if you were to ask a movie going citizen, like, what's the first thing comes to mind when you think of a character from Atlanta? And I think that's a telltale sign to really all these opinions about what we are, who we are.
So who do you identify then? What is the character?
Who's the character?
It seems Donald Glover's role in the Atlanta show, to me, covered a lot.
It did.
His specific role, because well-spoken. Where did he go? Harvard?
Some Ivy League school.
Had to come home.
Yeah.
We not some street, like, we have the knowledge. I got in like this. That's not nothing on, but the African American narrative in America, not just Atlanta, but America, family. Your cousin to your left or to your right ain't the same as that, and you might got to come home and deal with something. Next thing you know, life start lifing. Baby mama, not married, baby out of wedlock, but still had made it to the Ivy League school. So it's not like he's not capable. It's these other factors. And then once it went from episode to episode, you started to see like, Atlanta's like this is a choose your own adventure.
Yeah.
For
it's
him.
crazy.
But it's like, never forget that he made it up to the Ivy, and he was Paperboy's manager. Paperboy was a talent, so he did talent type things. But the thing was to keep your eye on Donald Glover, the ups and downs and the ins and outs, these capers and things he finds himself in, and how he got out of them or dealt with them. And it wasn't by being some threatening black male or some cowering tap dancing black male. It was like I gotta
figure it
out, which is human.
Yeah, that's
which
human.
is human. It humanized us. So, and I was very thankful for the show for that. Most shows, the reality shows, I think the other show, He Got Game, a few other shows, they paint this like nouveau riche type of lifestyle versus like a black person, like Chicago. The Chicago character trope but it's a city that also is not, we're ashamed of Magic City here, I guess, because we're in the Bible Belt. Chicago is not ashamed of Al Capone. They got music, like they don't shy away from that history. Yeah. But Atlanta doesn't want to tell you the Freaknik story per se. Hulu had it, but Atlanta, same with Magic City. And so this like hard luck, Southside Chicago climbed up, and now I've seen that story time and time again. Atlanta seems to tell. And it started, in our age group, with the Boys in the Hoods and the Menace to Societies.
Yeah.
It got told to me a few years ago, you go back in those early, the black gangster movies, and the characters that were trying to better themselves. Like, man, I got to get out the hood.
The one in New York with Wesley Snipes. And Ice-T.
New Jack City.
New Jack City, yeah. That was all of those to me in my mind.
All in that same juice.
Yep.
But the ones, especially out on the West Coast, because the West Coast doesn't have many HBCUs. So and this was during the era of not too long after School Days, but in a different world era. The character trying to escape the hood and the gang, what they identified as an escape, in both Menace to Society and Boys in the Hood was Atlanta. They were trying to get out of the hood in LA to Atlanta. So they don't even know, but somebody in Atlanta, from a Hollywood perspective, aside from seeing the Bloods and Crips, and we're looking at LA like bright lights.
Yeah.
Like, why would you want to leave this amazing whatever, but they're confined to that one space. And when we're younger, we're not understanding that the person in Compton ain't never gotten nowhere near close to that Hollywood sign. They're confined for whatever reason. They're somehow confined. So the character trope of LA became either confined by the NWA rap tales and that life, black, or white, bright lights in Hollywood. You didn't see, well, maybe there's a black executive over there. So there was no, but these Atlanta stories are more now. Everything is new. Like the Atlanta story itself is new to media, I feel. And it was designed in women. That was the last time in our age group where Atlanta was on TV in terms of sitcoms.
Damn, I forgot about that show.
Yeah, yo. And then, they were in Buckhead.
Yeah. No, now you
say
say I didn't watch it, but my grandma watched
yes.
it. Yeah.
And they were in Buckhead.
Yeah.
And they were country. And they had these like 4 women or whatever. And they had the one black gay guy. He was their friend.
Yeah.
Man, he didn't. And what's crazy is he didn't tap dance for them or like, yes, ma'am. Like he wasn't. He was their. He was a designer too. He was a designer, and so he was black, gay, confident with these white women. They were his sisters. You tell him he acted no different. So he wasn't cowering. He was very confident in his black gayness, and I remember this. But from a TV Hollywood standpoint, there's not much content from the city of Atlanta, storytelling, until this new age. And the black person, they come like somebody just got an NFL contract. They're a rookie. And the storyline is they get drafted by the Falcons or they live in Atlanta in the off season because it's this new black money. No one tells Hollywood doesn't tell a hard luck black story from the hood in Atlanta. Now, I'll end that by saying, if you ask the average moviegoer, TV watcher to identify a white Atlantan, they could not.
Yeah.
Could not. There has no, what would separate, now Nashville got its own thing.
Yeah.
But what would separate a white Atlantan from a white person in Charlotte? Other than that, there's no, you don't start to get a brand until you start to get to Alabama and Mississippi. And the Alabama Riverboat Brawl, it set progressive white people in Alabama back.
Yeah.
Thousands years. The Georgia might have a brand.
Yeah.
But
Definitely.
the progressive white metro Atlantan has no story that Hollywood could sell.
Yeah.
That would identify. You could be a white person anywhere, except for because you don't have the accent, so you don't have to define. And I think that's interesting.
Yeah, that is really. I think the old school answer would have been Ted Turner.
Yeah.
But
Charlie
now,
Loudermilk.
Charlie Loudermilk, maybe.
Yeah.
My old boss was Charlie. But I don't think. I think you're so right. I don't think there's any contemporary answer to that.
Yeah.
And I think when you look at
Yeah.
the reviews for A Man in Full,
Yeah.
Regina King did a good job. The book is obviously, the book is the book. It's the downside I saw in the reviews was character depth.
Yeah.
There was not enough story and character depth to fully round it out. And I felt like that made me go into this conversation.
Yeah.
I said,
Have you watched it?
Yeah.
Okay. I only started it.
Okay.
And again, I don't know if you know that the book, that character is Charlie.
Yes.
And I don't know if you know, I worked for him for 12 years directly.
Hell no.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. He's gave me my He's the reason I'm here.
You're not like Pete Grass.
No.
It's not. What's his name? You're not like the. Okay.
No.
But did you read the book?
Yeah. I read the book. And it's eerie for me to watch.
Jesus
I started watching the show because the actor nails Charlie's personality pretty well. Like, for him not to really, and maybe he saw some old footage or something. It was kind of weird. It's kind of eerie for me. And the other guys that work for Charlie, like, we've all been talking. They've been watching it. I just haven't watched it yet, but I need to watch it. Our next podcast, we'll talk about it.
I think they could have what the non-Atlanta connected viewer who's reviewing the movie or just watching on Netflix. Yeah. You're leaning in, but the black and white relationships and how it needed to get more depth and understanding.
Yeah.
And more depth and understanding could eventually produce a white brand.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's and as a black person, you know, I'm chill, but whenever I run up on a white person that is doing what I might consider too much posturing, too all right now you, and I'm like, yo, you gotta move. Because no one knows you exist in the world. You just a random white person in this place that could be a black crime cesspool, but we still control the brand. So what does that say about you? You complaining, but you living in the black cesspool brand. Like, you're living in it. So, like, it ain't on, it's on you. What you gonna do about it? Now, obviously, there are things that on the other side of the World Cup, you know, we're preparing for, in my mind, I'm preparing psychologically for a white mayor any day now. And that doesn't scare me. It's America. I mean, what did you think was going to happen? You know what I'm saying? So
it's come close a few times.
Mary
Norwood, and I don't know. That's going to be interesting to see what happens. I mean, I think Andre will have another run.
So you think Atlanta is going to change significantly as the years go on? Like, it's no longer going to be a place that's considered, like what you said, the Black Mecca. Maybe it'll be different.
And it's weird when you looked up the census. Atlanta's always been counterculture to America, and there's no reason to change. So as America apparently is getting blacker, Atlanta, staying true to its counterculture roots, is getting whiter. Atlanta proper. Now, the metro area is still, whatever, but Atlanta proper is becoming whiter and actually not more multicultural. So, again, when you start looking at Asian and Latino, they're still not aggressively in Atlanta proper. The city of Atlanta proper is just a pure, I think we said this before, we identify we're on like Cherokee Native American land, okay? You're white, I'm black. There is no one else in the city proper in the conversation. Now, once you start going to Alpharetta, Gwinnett, you start getting the other races, but in terms of the conversation.
Downtown, you're right. It's black or white.
And I don't know if there's another city in America like.
I don't think there is.
Where it's
not
just,
that I've experienced.
Those are the only two people in conversation.
Yeah,
for better or worse.
Yeah.
Because that does not look like America. It just looks like Atlanta. But what it is, and I guess I'll end that by saying what Atlanta is, for better or worse, is an aberration of America's past, like its sins. The Georgia 13th colony, so it's the original. Taking the Native American land that we're on, and then the white man and the slave. Everyone else, the Chinese that build a railroad, you got duped. It sucks that you got duped. But you came willingly, crossing the border in Mexico willingly, escaping persecution from Bosnia willingly. You see what I'm saying? So this is not a conversation of all those who came following that Statue of Liberty lady. This ain't, Atlanta's not and that could be holding us back in terms of progression, that we don't allow those voices fully. But that's because the group that was unwillingly brought over here is still, and it shows in A Man in Full, is still in, we haven't dealt with our business. We ain't dealing with the Latino. No, we not talking.
Yeah.
This black and white, we need to talk.
Yep.
And the unfortunate part for those other races, they're on the sidelines like, yeah, we understand, but at some point, are y'all going to be finished talking? You know what I'm saying? So,
not on this podcast.
Yeah,
we're going to do another one. So we're going to have to do another episode because thanks so much for doing this.
Yeah, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
It's such a great conversation.
Yeah.
Thank
You
you.
know, I think people are going to enjoy it.
Yeah.
And we're going to do another one
Oh, most definitely.
for sure.
Most definitely.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Back at it, craftmatic. All I know is mathematics. On the stove, cooking chicken, right rigid gymnastic. Acrobatic with the work, like Houdini do the magic. Me go bring me kilos, so I bust them squares up out the plastic. Get in traffic, also traffic, known to make that shit happen. Gotta use the razor, cut the chickens and some turkey wrapping. After 15 years of trapping, now young Jew done started